We usually only see the brilliant glow of fame, the flawless smiles, the standing ovations, the illusion of effortless success. But behind the stage lights lies a far more complicated truth: hidden battles, private pain, and deeply personal stories few ever witness, and even fewer truly understand. What many fans don't realize is that some Black female celebrities they admire today were assigned male at birth. Their journeys have been marked by fierce inner conflict, strained relationships, and relentless societal pressure. Yet they rose above it all to become powerful symbols of courage, resilience, and fearless reinvention. They walked a difficult, often lonely road in pursuit of their authentic selves. And the 19 stories you're about to hear belong to these remarkable women, stars who refuse to deny who they are, choosing truth, identity, and self-love no matter the cost. Major Griffin Gracie. Miss Major. A name forged in fire, and a life that helped ignite one of the fiercest movements for transgender justice in modern history. Founder of the Transgender Gender Variant Intersex Justice Project, she stands as a fearless Black trans elder who refused to live quietly in a world determined to erase her. Born into a strict, conservative family in Chicago, she grew up surrounded not only by poverty but by relentless stigma, violence, and rejection simply for being herself. From an early age, she felt the painful divide between body and spirit. At just 10 years old, she would slip into her mother's dresses, chasing fleeting moments of freedom, tiny flashes of joy in a childhood filled with confusion and fear. By 13, she found the courage to tell her family she was a girl. Instead of love, she faced punishment, psychologists who tried to fix her, priests performing exorcisms, and endless shame meant to crush her identity. In a household already struggling to survive, she felt abandoned and alone. Driven from home, Miss Major found her way to New York's underground drag ball scene in the 1960s, a fragile sanctuary where she could finally breathe. But survival came at a brutal cost. With gender-affirming surgery dangerously inaccessible at the time, she relied on risky DIY methods, homemade hormones from birth control pills, and painful chest taping that left her gasping for breath and battling chronic wounds. She worked wherever she could just to survive, yet arrests followed her constantly under laws that criminalized her very existence. Prisons like Bellevue and Attica became grim chapters of her life, places marked by violence and despair. Then came 1969, the Stonewall Uprising, when years of rage erupted and she fought back, hurling bottles at police in a moment that would echo through history. Still, the aftermath was lonely. She watched friends die from AIDS while support systems failed, and even parts of the mainstream LGBT movement marginalized Black trans women with criminal records. Grief and loss haunted her, but they never broke her spirit. In 2004, after decades of surviving prison walls, poverty, and a relentless fight for dignity, Miss Major co-founded the Transgender Gender Variant Intersex Justice Project, finally transforming her pain into purpose. Despite a body worn down by years of struggle and the lasting scars of violence and illness, she continues to stand strong, fighting for those society ignores and defending the right of every trans person to live freely and safely. Hers is not just a story of survival, it's a story of defiance, resilience, and a legacy carved from storms that could never silence her voice. Jackie Shane, a rebellious transgender soul icon who carried both brilliance and heartbreak through an era of relentless stigma and violence. Born in Nashville, Tennessee, into a fractured home, Jackie grew up surrounded by prejudice that tried to silence her truth. By the age of 5, she already felt the painful divide between body and soul, secretly slipping into her mother's clothes and experimenting with makeup, quiet acts of self-recognition in a world that refused to see her. At 10, she bravely came out to her mother, who stood fiercely by her side, giving Jackie the strength to live openly as a girl. She wore dresses to school despite stares, segregation, and cruelty. In the unforgiving South of the 1950s, classmates and even teachers attacked her for being different, forcing her to fight simply to survive. As she grew older, Jackie found refuge in music, singing in church choirs and discovering a voice that would soon electrify audiences. By the late 1950s, she lit up Nashville clubs with fearless feminine energy, catching the attention of legends like Little Richard. In 1959, she escaped to Toronto, Canada, fleeing harsh U.S. laws that criminalized gender expression, yet safety remained fragile. She walked city streets hidden beneath long coats, constantly fearing arrest. At just 20, she underwent early silicone breast surgery in a Montreal clinic, enduring crude procedures that left lifelong scars. The 1960s brought rising fame, including her 1963 hit Any Other Way, but behind the spotlight she carried crushing tension, secrecy, and emotional exhaustion that eventually led to addiction and isolation. In 1971, Jackie stepped away from music entirely, retreating home to care for her aunt alongside her mother in quiet seclusion. Over the years she endured profound loss, watching both women pass away with little support around her. When Jackie Shane died in 2019, the world she had once inspired offered little comfort, a bittersweet ending for an artist who had poured her soul into music and the fight to live authentically. Marsha P. Johnson, a fearless Stonewall warrior living on the razor's edge of survival. A towering figure in the fight for transgender rights, she dedicated her life to pushing the world toward compassion and change. Born into poverty in New Jersey alongside 6 siblings, she grew up in a society thick with prejudice, where every step forward felt like walking against a storm. From a young age, Marsha sensed the painful divide between who she was and who the world demanded she be. At just 5 years old, she slipped into her sister's dresses and found comfort in dolls, small acts of self-truth that were quickly met with cruelty. Instead of acceptance, schoolyard bullies targeted her relentlessly, leaving deep scars of loneliness and fear. Her world darkened further at 13 when she was assaulted by an older boy who mistook her for a girl. Even more devastating was the absence of protection from those who should have shielded her. The trauma lingered like an open wound. By 18, with only $15 and a small bag of clothes, Marsha fled home in search of freedom. New York City became both refuge and battlefield, a place where she drifted through homelessness and survival on the streets. To stay alive, she sometimes traded her body, facing constant violence from clients and harassment from police. Arrests for gender impersonation became a brutal routine. Around her, friends were beaten, some even killed, and grief became a constant companion. By 1966, desperate to live authentically, Marsha turned to black market hormones, risky and unsupervised. She underwent makeshift procedures from unqualified practitioners, including painful facial alterations and dangerous fillers that left her battling infections and lasting scars. Iron corsets reshaped her body but condemned her to chronic back pain. Still, her spirit refused to break. In 1969, at the Stonewall Uprising, years of rage and resilience exploded when she stood up to police harassment, a moment that helped ignite a global movement for LGBTQ+ liberation. The years that followed were far from easy. Arrests, poverty, and the crushing weight of trauma led to struggles with mental health and repeated hospitalizations. She survived by selling fruit on the streets while the AIDS epidemic devastated her chosen family, claiming countless friends as government support remained painfully absent. Perhaps the deepest wound came from exclusion within her own community, rejected by some feminist and LGBTQ+ circles who dismissed her as too loud, too black, too trans, too unconventional. Yet even in isolation, Marsha remained radiant, smiling, generous, and endlessly devoted to helping others survive. In 1992, her extraordinary yet turbulent life came to a tragic end when her body was found in the Hudson River. Though her journey was marked by hardship and heartbreak, Marsha P. Johnson's courage continues to echo through history, a symbol of resilience, defiance, and the unyielding fight for dignity and love. Dorian Corey. Dorian Corey, a drag queen icon whose legendary life carried a dark and haunting edge. Revered as a powerful ball mother and founder of the iconic House of Corey, she rose to fame through unforgettable performances and razor-sharp creativity. Born into a middle-class black family in Buffalo, New York, Dorian recognized her true self early. By age 7, she was secretly slipping into her mother's clothes, practicing elegance in front of mirrors. But acceptance never came easily. At 16, after being discovered wearing a dress, she was forced out of her home. By 17, she began transitioning using dangerous Premarin hormone injections sourced from Harlem veterinary supplies, high doses that turned her skin yellow and caused years of unexpected bleeding. Entering the drag scene in 1955, Dorian helped shape ballroom culture, creating the House of Corey and designing costumes for hundreds of queens while choreographing performances that defined an era. In 1962, she traveled to Puerto Rico for early silicone breast implants under Harry Benjamin, heavy, painful enhancements that left her with lifelong shoulder aches. Fearful of the deadly risks of bottom surgery common at the time, she relied instead on extreme tucking methods that caused lasting scars and numbness. From the 1960s through the 1980s, Dorian reigned as a dazzling and respected ball mother, admired for her artistry and strength. Yet behind the glamour lived relentless struggle. Before 1970 alone, she was arrested more than 20 times simply for cross-dressing. The HIV/AIDS crisis of the 1980s devastated her community, claiming dozens of friends and beloved ball children she had mentored. Though grief and illness surrounded her, Dorian remained fiercely devoted to her craft and her chosen family until her passing in 1993, leaving behind a legacy as complex, resilient, and unforgettable as the legend herself. Sir Lady Java, a fearless transgender icon who stood tall against violence, discrimination, and relentless stigma under the harsh spotlight of entertainment. A legendary drag performer and early voice for trans rights, she spent her life pushing back against a world determined to silence her. Born into a deeply conservative black community in New Orleans, where femininity in boys was condemned, she endured abuse and rejection from both family and society from a very young age. By just 10 years old, Sir Lady Java already understood she was different. She secretly slipped into her mother's dresses and danced to the rhythms of street jazz, only to face cruel bullying and harsh punishment instead of acceptance. That constant rejection carved a deep loneliness into her early years. At 16, she openly embraced her identity and began her transition in desperate, dangerous ways, using crushed birth control pills to try to create the changes she longed for, leaving her sick and physically damaged. Unable to fix her, her family cast her out, forcing her to leave New Orleans in 1960 and rebuild herself in Los Angeles. In LA, she found a stage at the Red Fox Club, dazzling audiences as a dancer and drag performer. Her magnetic presence and self-designed costumes, inspired by the legendary Josephine Baker, quickly made her a rising star. But fame couldn't shield her from systemic cruelty. A discriminatory rule banning, gender impersonation, performances led to constant arrests, police violence, and lost work. Still, she refused to stay silent. In 1967, she bravely challenged the law, partnering with the ACLU as one of its first transgender clients. Though the legal battle failed, her courage ignited early resistance against anti-trans policies. Her later years were marked by poverty, homelessness, and survival in underground clubs and prisons, where she endured violence from both the wider world and even within marginalized communities. Branded an outsider and attacked for defying gender norms, she carried the heavy pain of rejection from her own people. Yet through every hardship, Sir Lady Java never stopped dancing, each performance an act of fierce defiance against a world that tried to erase her, and a powerful reminder that resilience can shine even in the darkest spotlight. Pepper LaBeija. Pepper LaBeija, a drag queen who rose from the shadows of poverty, stigma, and the devastating AIDS era to become a towering legend of ballroom culture. Born William Jackson, Pepper would grow into an icon whose name echoed through Harlem's underground runways and beyond. She became the fierce and loving mother of the House of LaBeija, a chosen family, a sanctuary, a lifeline for black and transgender youth searching for belonging in a world that often rejected them. William's childhood was heavy with hardship. Raised in deep poverty in the Bronx, surrounded by gunfire, hunger, cold nights, and relentless violence, he found his only escape in secret moments, slipping into his mother's dresses after midnight, imagining a life where he could exist freely as himself. When his mother discovered him, she didn't crush his dreams. Instead, she offered a warning and a gift: the world will try to devour you alive. Then she taught him how to sew, showing him that if he wanted beauty, he had to create it with his own hands. Not everyone was so kind. At just 12 years old, William was brutally beaten by his alcoholic father for wearing a dress to school. "Black men can't afford weakness," he barked, words that forced the young dreamer onto the streets. William fled to Greenwich Village, dancing for tourists just to survive. Then, at a Harlem ball in 1967, Pepper was truly born. Crystal LaBeija, the legendary mother of the House of LaBeija, looked into his eyes and declared, "You are my daughter now. I name you Pepper, because you're spicy, fierce, and unforgettable." In that moment, Pepper found her real family. Her journey toward transition was raw and dangerous. With no doctors, no guidance, and no safety net, Pepper injected homemade hormone mixtures that left her body swollen and in constant pain. Her legs became so bloated she wore heels 2 sizes too large for over 15 years. In 1975, she underwent early gender-affirming surgery with a controversial Mexican surgeon using a crude inversion method that left her with chronic pain and lifelong complications. Every day, she endured hours of painful self-dilation with makeshift tools. Still, she never gave up. To survive, Pepper worked any job she could find, sweeping floors, dancing go-go in clubs, and sometimes selling her body when money disappeared. Police harassment was constant. Arrests for female impersonation came with violence, humiliation, and trauma. Yet she refused to be broken. When Crystal LaBeija died of breast cancer in 1972, Pepper stepped up as the new mother of the House of LaBeija, guiding her children through poverty, racism, and transphobia. She taught them how to walk the runway with pride even as beer bottles flew across slick club floors. Her mantra became legendary: "If I can't walk through the front door of this world, I'll kick it down." The AIDS crisis of the 1980s devastated her community. More than 40 of Pepper's children, including her longtime partner Raphael, died in her arms. She cared for them in her tiny apartment, offering love and comfort as the world looked away. Each loss carved another scar into her heart. When Paris is Burning brought ballroom culture to the global stage in 1987, Pepper's charisma lit up the screen, but behind the spotlight were lonely nights counting pills, crying over medicines she couldn't afford for the people she loved. In her later years, Pepper faced breast cancer herself, mirroring Crystal's fate. With no insurance and little support, she battled fiercely until the end, bald, exhausted, but still commanding respect with her raspy, unbreakable voice. In 2003, Pepper LaBeija passed away in a public hospital. Yet her spirit lives on in every ballroom chant, every fearless walk, every chosen family that refuses to disappear. The House of LaBeija endures, and so does the legacy of a woman who turned pain into power and survival into art. Laverne Cox. A life shaped by tears, courage, and an unbreakable will to become one of the first openly transgender stars to change the face of television. More than her iconic role as Sophia in Orange is the New Black, Laverne emerged as a powerful voice for visibility, dignity, and equality. Behind the spotlight lies a story of survival, a journey through violence, rejection, and stigma that she transformed into strength and purpose. Growing up in the South in a single-parent household, Laverne faced a world that often treated her femininity as something dangerous or wrong. Even as a child, she felt different, drawn to self-expression that others didn't understand. The rejection she faced from peers and family left deep scars, pushing her into loneliness and dark thoughts at a young age. When she opened up about her identity as a teenager, she encountered harsh judgment and attempts to fix who she was, forcing her into a painful struggle between self-acceptance and societal pressure. But acting became her refuge, a place where she could exist freely and dream beyond her circumstances. With relentless determination, she pursued her transition and built a career in New York, taking on whatever work she could to support her journey and chase her artistic goals. Along the way, she faced industry rejection, financial hardship, and relentless public scrutiny. Yet she refused to disappear. In 2008, she even produced a groundbreaking documentary highlighting transgender lives despite being denied funding and pushed into debt. Her breakthrough arrived in 2013 when she stepped into the role of Sophia Bursett, becoming a global symbol of representation and hope. Through every setback, From harassment on sets to criticism on red carpets, Laverne Cox stood firm, proving that authenticity is power. Today, she remains not just a television star, but a fearless advocate who helped redefine beauty, courage, and what it means to live your truth in a world still learning to listen. Dominique Jackson. Dominique Jackson, Pose actress, once an undocumented refugee, now a force who conquered the spotlight. A television phenomenon, she stands as living proof that survival can turn into triumph. She isn't famous only for Elektra or Pose. She is a ballroom mother, a protector, endlessly fighting to build family and home in a world stacked with bias and hostility. Raised in conservative Scarborough, Tobago, Dominique knew she was different from the start. At 7, she slipped into her mother's clothes, dreaming of a life that felt true, only to be punished for it. Beatings followed. Days locked away for daring to express femininity. At 12, she came out, not to love or understanding, but to exile. Cast out, Dominique wandered the streets of Trinidad with nothing, surviving however she could. In 1990, she arrived in America on a tourist visa and slipped into undocumented life. No money, no protection. New York, promised as an LGBTQ haven, greeted her instead with relentless hardship. Visa troubles landed her in jail, nearly deported. Not until 1993 did her transition begin, guided by community doctors. Estradiol patches and black market progesterone ravaged her body, causing cystic acne across her face and neck. Broke, she shared hormones with friends, risking severe heart damage. By 2000, she underwent full surgery in a budget clinic in Trinidad. Infection followed, 2 brutal tissue debridements. While rebuilding herself, she found salvation in ballroom, a chosen family. She walked runways in outfits stitched from scraps, yet mainstream fashion rejected her as too tall, too dark. In 2009, her memoir The Transsexual from Tobago was dismissed. Publishers said the world wasn't ready. The struggle stacked higher, but never broke her flame. Then came 2018, Elektra, Pose, and the peak of her career. But before the glory were battles with addiction, abusive relationships, and watching AIDS steal friends one by one, without support or mercy. Dominique Jackson didn't just survive history, she carved herself into it. Janet Mock. Janet Mock, a life forged above stigma, rising from vulnerable beginnings to directing Pose. A transgender trailblazer, she's more than a writer and director, she's a fearless voice for LGBTQ+ rights. From childhood, Janet sensed she was different. A little girl dreaming of Barbie dolls and movie sets while strict gender norms in her conservative family left her feeling alone. At 14, she came out to her mother and met not acceptance, but painful conflict. By 15, during a family trip to Thailand, she quietly began her transition, navigating hormones in secrecy and uncertainty, yet emerging without complications. Back in the US, she carried her truth in silence through college. In 2001, at 18, Janet underwent groundbreaking one-stage gender-affirming surgery in Bangkok, an experience so private she maintained anonymity through a decade in journalism. Partial school insurance in Hawaii covered some costs, but she still faced harsh realities, including sex work, to survive. Everything changed in 2009 when her Marie Claire essay revealed her story to the world, launching a bold new chapter. Yet fame came with criticism, even within the LGBTQ+ community, leaving her isolated and battling depression. It wasn't until 2017, when she helped create and write Pose and secured a landmark Netflix deal, that Janet stepped fully into her power. Despite relentless pressure and scrutiny, she continues to tell stories that heal, proving that with resilience and courage, even the heaviest barriers can be shattered. Angelica Ross. A name forged through fire. A transgender entertainment icon whose journey is anything but easy, Angelica stands today as a symbol of resilience and fearless authenticity. Born into a strict military family where any hint of femininity was punished, she endured brutal lashings from her father simply for trying on her sister's clothes. At just 16, she spoke her truth and was cast out, left homeless and alone. Fighting to survive, she turned to sex work, carrying dreams bigger than her circumstances. An attempt to enlist in the military at 18 ended quickly after harassment forced her discharge. Still, she refused to break. In 2005, she began her transition, facing dangerous complications from imported hormones that caused painful physical changes and sleepless nights, pushing her into deep depression. In 2009, during breast surgery in Chicago, she was denied full anesthesia because of her HIV status, forced to stay awake through 3 grueling hours, enduring every cut with unshakable courage. Refusing to be defined by pain, she founded TransTech in 2014 to create opportunities for transgender people, even after early funding struggles nearly shut it down. Her breakthrough acting success arrived in 2018 with her powerful role in Pose, yet the path forward remained filled with cyberbullying and stigma. Through every setback, Angelica Ross rose, transforming from a rejected teenager into a pioneering CEO and activist, a living testament to strength, endurance, and unapologetic truth. Isis King. Isis King, a transgender trailblazer who refused to let stigma define her story or silence her voice. A standout supermodel who captured hearts on America's Next Top Model, she rose from adversity to become a powerful icon in fashion and beyond. Raised in a strict, conservative Black religious household, Isis discovered her creative spark early, secretly sketching designs and hosting school radio shows from the age of 9. But that same spark made her a target for relentless bullying, pushing her into a lonely battle few understood. At just 15, the weight of judgment and pressure nearly broke her. Still, she fought her way back. By 18, Isis bravely came out and began her transition, even as life forced her into homelessness and survival within New York's LGBTQ+ shelter system. She endured slow, painful hormone treatments, waiting years for her body to reflect her truth. In 2007, she underwent breast surgery in Philadelphia, only to face complications 2 years later that required a $12,000 correction she funded herself with savings from the very show that changed her life. When Isis stepped onto America's Next Top Model in 2008, she didn't just compete, she challenged norms. Despite prejudice from fellow contestants and the crushing weight of financial and personal struggles, she kept walking forward. Modeling opportunities often disappeared once her trans history surfaced, yet she refused to disappear with them. Every step she took down the runway was more than fashion. It was resilience, defiance, and the courage to be seen. Her journey is not just about fame, but about survival, strength, and the relentless pursuit of authenticity, no matter the cost. Amaya Scott. Amaya Scott, the doll-like transgender model once pushed out of shows for being too curvaceous, who refused to let the world decide her worth. Rising from a strict, conservative upbringing, she transformed pain into power and became a striking force in entertainment. Raised in a Jamaican immigrant household in Harlem, Amaya grew up fighting constant ridicule for her femininity. At just 7 years old, she played with her mother's lipstick and stitched skirts from old tablecloths, small acts of self-expression that were met with harsh punishment from her father. When she came out at 14, family rejection intensified, even leading to attempts to pray away her identity in Pentecostal churches. But Amaya never surrendered. She found refuge in New York's underground ball culture, carving out a space where she could exist boldly despite violence and discrimination. In 2005, desperate to become herself, she experimented with dangerous homemade hormone regimens that left her body in agony, rapid weight gain, hair loss, and hospitalizations. Still, her spirit remained unbreakable. By 2010, she was hustling as an Instagram model, turning thrift store finds into fierce fashion statements while doors in the industry slammed shut, labeling her too curvy and too black. Then came a turning point in 2015 with her breakout role in Star, launching her into the spotlight. Yet even success couldn't shield her from harassment, stigma, and online cruelty. Through it all, from childhood beatings and abandonment to cultural bias and public scrutiny, Amaya Scott stood tall, stepping onto every runway not just as a model, but as a living symbol of resilience, courage, and unapologetic authenticity. Michaela J. Rodriguez. A journey from hardship to Golden Globe glory. Born and raised in the struggling neighborhoods of Newark, New Jersey, MJ Rodriguez grew up fighting battles most people never saw. Long before the spotlight found her, she wrestled with her identity in a world quick to judge. As a child, she dreamed of standing on Broadway stages, but at home her femininity was met with fear rather than support. At school, she hid behind a mask, presenting as a boy just to survive the bullying. At 12, she poured her truth into a heartfelt letter to her mother, only to be met with religious counseling and heavy medication instead of understanding. Still, MJ refused to disappear. In 2009, she began her transition at a small New Jersey clinic, enduring intense hormone treatments and the physical toll that came with them, even binding her chest painfully during acting classes to keep working. Determined to align her voice with her spirit, she later underwent vocal feminization surgery in Korea, a risky decision that nearly cost her the very voice she fought so hard to find. Casting directors labeled her not masculine enough for male roles and too trans for female ones, yet she kept pushing forward. Then came 2018 and her groundbreaking role as Blanca in Pose, a performance that didn't just earn her global recognition, it made history with a Golden Globe win. MJ Rodriguez didn't simply overcome adversity, she shattered expectations and turned her truth into triumph under the brightest lights. India Moore. India Moore. A painful journey from foster care to the radiant glow of Pose. She isn't just a rising star, she's a living symbol of resilience, fighting relentlessly to claim her place in the world. At 14, India ran from a home shadowed by violence and abuse, left homeless with nothing but a battered phone and dreams too fierce to die. By 15, she came out as trans and began community-based hormone therapy, rationing estradiol every other day. Progress so slow and uncertain she nearly gave up. Yet even through exhaustion and poverty, her vision never faded. At 16, she found refuge in the ballroom scene and stepped onto runways, transforming struggle into art. Through Beetle Media, India created short films that honored her community, turning a cracked phone screen into her creative forge. The fashion world rejected her again and again, too dark, too different, too undefined, but she refused to shrink. Then came 2018, when her role as Angel in Pose lit up the world, proving that an unbreakable spirit can turn pain into power and visibility into victory. Hailey Sahar. Hailey Sahar. From a childhood shadowed by family violence to a breakout role that changed everything, Hailey Sahar stands as a fierce symbol of resilience. Raised on the tough streets of South Central, she grew up facing stigma, rejection, and cruelty, but she never let it silence her spirit. At just 7 years old, she was already choreographing hip-hop gospel routines in her family's garage, slipping into feminine outfits to perform despite the punishment that followed. Her mother struggled to accept her identity, even taking her to pastors in hopes of fixing her, but Hailey refused to shrink. By 14, standing up for herself fractured her family and nearly left her homeless. In 2006, desperate to transition, she risked her health experimenting with hormones, enduring terrifying medical emergencies. At 19, she finally saved enough for surgery in Thailand, surviving on odd jobs while drowning in debt. Through it all, her creativity never faded, until her powerful role as Lulu on Pose in 2015 finally brought her into the spotlight she always deserved. Maya Taylor. Maya Taylor. From an outcast teenager to an award-winning actress, she carved her way through darkness to claim a place in Hollywood. As a child, she found refuge in church gospel, her voice growing strong in a world that tried to silence her dreams. At just 8 years old, she was already imitating Aretha Franklin, but instead of applause, she faced ridicule and bullying. Her early years became a battlefield of fights, rejection, and loneliness from those who refused to understand her. At 16, she showed up to prom in a gown and was expelled, sent away to reform camp. Life in Dallas grew even harsher. Black market hormones, dangerous overdoses, rapid physical changes, and painful stretch marks pushed her into deep depression. But she refused to give up. She moved to Los Angeles with nothing but ambition, working fast food jobs while paying off surgery debts and chasing every acting opportunity she could find. Then came her breakthrough in 2014, playing Alexandra in the iPhone-shot indie film Tangerine. Even after being told she was too rough for leading roles, she proved everyone wrong, delivering a raw, unforgettable performance that earned her an Independent Spirit Award and cemented her place in cinematic history. Lena Bloom. Lena Bloom, the first trans woman of color to grace the cover of Vogue India, is more than a model. She's a force that shattered barriers and rewrote the rules. Raised on the tough south side of Chicago, where masculinity and sports dominated, Lena carved out a fearless path towards self-truth. Pushed into grueling workouts by her father from a young age, she carried a body that never reflected who she truly was. At 17, she came out, stepped onto a runway, and won her first modeling competition, but the victory came with a cost when her father cut her off financially, forcing her into independence as an aerobics instructor while living with her grandmother. In 2007, she began hormone therapy through glut-implanted estradiol pellets, a choice with fewer side effects but crushing expenses without insurance, pushing her into risky clinical trials just to survive. Betting everything on herself, she moved to New York in 2014 with one suitcase and relentless determination, surviving on round-the-clock gym work while facing years of rejection fueled by transphobia and industry bias. None of it broke her. Instead, it led to a historic breakthrough, her groundbreaking appearance on the 2021 Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue, cementing her place as a trailblazer who turned pain into power. Yari Jones. Yari Jones. A true trailblazer, Calvin Klein's first plus-size transgender woman of color, whose life is a powerful story of resilience, creativity, and breaking barriers. An independent filmmaker, plus-size model, and influential Black trans cultural icon, Yari has left her mark through memorable guest appearances in Pose and a range of bold, unconventional creative projects. Raised in an artistic family in Albany, she picked up a camera at just 10 years old, writing scripts about fearless female superheroes while quietly battling school bullying over her gentle, expressive personality. At 18, she publicly came out as transgender through a self-written stage play, earning critical acclaim but also family backlash that forced her to relocate to Brooklyn with only a modest scholarship and an unbreakable dream. In 2004, she began hormone therapy. Because of her body size, the process was physically demanding, requiring higher doses and bringing painful side effects that disrupted her creative research. Still, she persevered, taking on independent film gigs simply to survive. By 2008, after years of sacrifice, she underwent breast augmentation surgery in Miami with 800 cubic centimeters implants, among the largest within the trans community, symbolizing her determination to fully embrace her identity. Her struggles didn't end there. In 2010, she released Ball Culture Doc, filmed on borrowed equipment while drowning in debt and fighting countless post-production obstacles. Life continued to test her strength. In 2015, she faced bankruptcy and homelessness, at one point living in a friend's studio while confronting harsh stigma in the indie film world for telling raw stories about Black transgender lives. Yet resilience defined her journey. In 2019, she reached a historic milestone with a guest appearance in Unlocked Doors and became Calvin Klein's first plus-size transgender woman of color, a moment that cemented her place as a symbol of courage and transformation. We've now explored the lives of 19 Black stars who have shattered gender boundaries and redefined what it means to be fearless. How do their stories make you feel today? Do you see them differently now? Drop your thoughts in the comments and share your perspective on their challenging yet extraordinary journeys. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button so you won't miss our upcoming videos, where more powerful, authentic entertainment stories are waiting to be uncovered.